Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. Tonight we are most likely getting our first frost of the season and it feels like it's coming. It is cold out here. I hope that you'll excuse my voice today. I have been it's been a little bit of a rough early fall. I had a lot of really intense allergies this year, which I don't usually have, but for some reason they were pretty intense this year, and now I think I've got a little bit of a head cold going on. But weather kind of dictates what we have to do. So I don't really have the luxury today of lying around on the couch reading a book, even though that's what I feel like doing, because, as I said, tonight will most likely be our first frost. Now, here at my house, we have not had a full frost yet, although a lot of the houses on our street have actually had a frost. We're a little bit protected here. As you can see, we're surrounded by a lot of trees, and we're also at a little bit of a higher elevation, not a really high elevation, but there's a lot of houses on our road that are in a little bit of a valley, and because we're not in that, think that we have been protected a little bit from a frost. We have had little nips of frost here and there at the tops of some of my plants, but we haven't had a real killing frost yet, but that is most likely coming tonight, so we have some things to do to prepare for that. So here you can see my strawberries overall actually look pretty good, but you can see they're getting little bits of damage on the edge of the leaves. That's pretty normal this time of the year, and especially, as I mentioned, we haven't had a full frost yet, but we have had some really cool nights. And you can see my pepper plant over here. This pepper plant was separated from my other peppers because I was trying to isolate it to get true seeds, and you can see it's still alive, but it is not happy with a lot of the cold weather we've been getting at night. So I have actually, over the past few days, I have been doing a lot of the frost prep that we need to do. So I've already gone through the garden and harvested all of the peppers and tomatoes that I'm planning to take. I harvested my sweet potatoes. My winter squashes have been pulled in. I have a couple pumpkins I still have to grab, but I harvested all the basil. So most of my frost sensitive crops have been harvested and brought into the house, but I do have a few little tasks that I want to get done today. So I think we'll start right off the bat with a quick and easy task, which is this pepper plant here. So this plant is one of my orange Cono de Toro pepper plants, which is a fairly rare variety. I do have more seeds for it, not a lot, but I do have a few more seeds for this variety. But because it's kind of a rare variety, I want to take this plant into my garage to try to overwinter it. So what I'm planning to do is to clip back all the branches. I don't want to overwinter it in this state. I want to overwinter it as a dormant plant. So okay, wow, that wind is really picking up. I think you can probably hear the acorns falling on the chicken coop roof. And hopefully the wind sound doesn't interfere too much with this video. Anyway, so this pepper, I'm just going to keep it in the pot that it's in. I'm going to clip the leaves down so it just has a very small, I don't know, just so it's a much smaller plant. And I'm keeping it in my garage. I'm going to keep it in the dark, and it gets cold in my garage, but it does not get below freezing. So that should keep it in a dormant state without actually killing it. I did try this experiment last year with a few of my pepper plants, and they all ended up dying, but I think that was because I did not water them as much as I should have. So that is, at least in theory, an easy enough problem to fix. So I'm just going to have to bring this in. I'll look around on my deck and see. I may end up choosing another pepper plant or two to spare from the frost and bring inside too. And then I'll just have to remember to water it as the winter goes on. And then the idea with that is that, of course, this plant should, in theory, live as long as I remember to water it. But it also will already be established. Obviously, it'll have to recreate all this top growth. But the idea with that is that I won't have to start this plant from seed, so it should hopefully give me a little bit of an earlier harvest. This is a little bit experimental on my part. So if you have done anything similar to this, I would love to hear your results. So I'm going to go grab my clippers. We're just going to give this plant a pretty serious haircut and bring it into the garage. So as you can see, this doesn't really look like anything anymore, kind of a dead plant, but it's not actually dead. So I'm going to bring this in. I'll take the stake out because it's not going to need that over the winter. And we'll take this little tie off, and hopefully it'll be able to survive the winter like this. So I will keep you updated in the spring as to how this pepper plant does and if it survives the winter. I figured it's kind of, it may not survive the winter, but I don't really have anything to lose because all I have to do is bring it in the garage and just water it every so often so that it doesn't completely dry out. I mean, it's not going to cost me anything and it's minimal time investment, so I figured we would give it a try. So it does always feel good to start off by doing something quick that you can quickly check off the to-do list. So we've already got one project done, granted a very small one, but I still get to put that check in the box. Next, we're going to turn to these strawberries here. You can see my strawberry plants have created lots of runners in the pathway here, and we really don't want strawberries growing through the pathway. So what I'm planning to do is to dig up all of those strawberry runners that are growing in the pathway, and we're going to bring them over here. This is where one of my apple trees is growing, and you can see I've got a little bit of a permaculture guild established. I don't know if I should really say established, we just planted it together this spring, but planted around the base of this apple tree. And one thing that I was waiting for this time of year for was to add some strawberries here. I want to add some strawberries in between a lot of these other plants that I have here for this permaculture guild because strawberries make an excellent ground cover. As you could see over in my garden, they were spreading and covering the ground. So that is really going to help to suppress weed growth. You can see in between the plants that I planted, there are some weeds growing up in this, basically in this little guild here. And planting my strawberries, I was going to say thickly. I don't even really need to plant them thickly. I can spread them out and they will establish themselves and ultimately grow pretty thickly on their own. So we're just going to go ahead and dig up the strawberries in the path there, bring them over here and plant them here. Now strawberries, the reason I chose strawberries as opposed to some other type of ground cover is just because, the strawberries aren't the primary crop that I'm going to be focusing on here. I am hopeful that we probably won't get a real lot of yield because this isn't going to be optimal growing conditions. Once this tree is established, they will be pretty shaded out. But, even getting a little bit of a strawberry here and there as a bonus, and I've got to do something with the strawberry plants anyway, so I might as well put them to good use. So let's go collect some strawberry plants and get them planted over here. These are actually more established into the mulch than I thought they would be. So, I just clipped it from the parent plant there, and I'm actually going to have to, I thought these would come out pretty easily, but we're going to have to work at this a little bit. Here we go. The nice thing about transplanting strawberry runners in the fall like this is that strawberry plants take a season to establish. By transplanting them in the fall, they're going to establish through the fall and the winter, and they'll already have a root system come spring when it's time for them to start flowering and thinking about bearing fruit. Now, obviously, in this case, these particular strawberries, fruit is not our primary goal with them, but, it's still a little bit of a bonus, and, not having to wait an extra year for that fruit can be a great thing. So this would be even more important if I was planning to establish a strawberry bed somewhere. So I'm just going to dig up the rest of these runners. I'll meet you back here and we'll go plant them by our apple tree. So here's my bucket of strawberries. I'm not sure why I thought this little pot would be big enough to hold them all, but for some reason I did, and now we've got this whole bucket of strawberries to plant. So I have no idea how many strawberry plants I have here, but it's at least as many, probably more than what I originally bought when I started that strawberry bed over there. So strawberry plants, if they're happy, will definitely multiply really easily and really quickly. I actually am hoping next year to get another green stalk planter that I want to grow strawberries in. So next year when my strawberry plants make runners again, that's what I'll hopefully be doing with them. But for this year, I needed somewhere I could put them quickly, so we're going to go ahead and get them planted over here. So I don't really have a specific rhyme or reason for how I'm planning to arrange these. I'm basically just going to spread them out and plug them in wherever I have space in this guild. So if you're interested in seeing how we planted this guild together, I will go ahead and link that video in the video description below so you can check that out. I'm also not going to be all that precise with how I plant these. As you could see with that one that I just planted, I just dug a little hole, stuck it in the soil, and smoothed the soil back over it. The one thing that you want to do is make sure, let me find a good example here. So the strawberry crown here, which is basically the part between where the leaves come out and where the root is, the base of the plant where everything kind of holds together. So you want that part not to be completely buried in the soil, but you don't want to be sitting on top of the soil either. So I'm just going to, as I said, I'm not being really precise about this. I'm just going to make sure the roots are covered and it goes just slightly past the roots, so you won't see any roots, but I'm not going to cover the spot where the leaves join together and come out of the ground. And in a situation like this, you can see I buried it slightly deeper than I meant to. I'm just going to kind of tease it upwards and fill the soil in around it. It is a little bit easier to plant it a little more carefully and how I actually want it to be when I'm not holding a camera in my hand. So I'm going to go ahead and set you guys down and get the rest of these planted. So now that I've got all those strawberry runners planted around the apple tree, I actually had more than I could really use around the apple tree. So I went over to my other apple tree and filled in a couple bare spots there. So there are, as I said, I've already harvested the bulk of the frost tender crops in the garden, but I do have some beans here. I don't anticipate getting very many beans from these plants because we've already harvested quite a few and they're kind of, they still look pretty healthy, but they're actually kind of on the way out just because of the way the weather has been colder than they would like. So I'm going to harvest what we have here from these beans just for fresh beans. And then my pole beans are done really just because I stopped harvesting them because we had so many, more than we could eat. So I decided to let the rest of the beans kind of dry on the plant. We've actually harvested a lot of dried pole beans already, and my plan for those is to save a handful of each variety for seed. And then what I'm going to try to do is cook up some of the other dried beans that we've saved. I have a lot of rattlesnake beans. I'll show you those when we harvest them. And I have heard that once they dry, you can cook up the beans inside, and they're kind of like pinto beans. And we have a couple, so the bulk of the beans that we'll be harvesting for dry beans are rattlesnake beans, but I have a couple other varieties too. So we're going to try harvesting those. Well, we are going to harvest them, and then I'm going to try cooking them up and see how they work. So this whole section of bush beans here, these are all plants that I planted for, I want to say a second harvest, but really a third harvest. When I pulled out the garlic that was here, I replaced a lot of it with these beans. And as you can see, we have some beans to harvest, so I'm just going to get these picked. As I said, I don't anticipate a lot of these, but I'm hoping that we get enough to have a little side dish with dinner tonight. So I'm harvesting even the ones like these that are a little bit smaller than what I would normally use. Normally I would let these mature on the plant a little bit, but since frost is coming, they're not going to have time to mature on the plant. So I'm just going to go ahead and harvest all of these today. So this isn't really a really large harvest of beans, but it's enough that it'll make a small little side dish for dinner, or maybe I can toss them on top of a little salad for dinner. Definitely enough that it was worth coming out here and harvesting them. So as far as the plants themselves, I'm not going to do anything with them at the moment. I'm just going to let them stay here. My plan is not to pull them up because beans are nitrogen fixers. Basically what that means is that beans, kind of in combination with a bacteria that lives in the soil, can collect nitrogen from the air and fix it on their roots and use that to grow. So these will really enrich the soil, but I don't want to pull them up because I want to make sure that the nitrogen on their roots gets put to good use in my soil. So when they're done at the end of the season, a lot of people will go through and cut them at the roots, leave the roots in the soil, and toss the tops in the compost. What I think I'm going to do is I think I'm just going to leave the entire plants in this bed as a winter mulch. This is actually where I'm going to be planting my garlic again in a few weeks, probably towards the middle of November, sometime around there, depending on weather. I'll be planting my garlic in here. At the time that I'm filming this, it's actually mid-October. It is actually, the last couple years, our first frost has been later. We've had our first frost as late as mid-November, usually around early November. And for my area here in Connecticut, that's pretty late. This year, we're having it in mid-October, which is that's around our average time. So I like to plant garlic after the first frost and before the ground has frozen. So that will be a completely separate video. For today, what I'm just going to do is just leave these beans here. Once the frost has come and killed them back, at that point I'll just lift these stragglers up and lay them across the bed. But there's a chance that we won't get a frost tonight, and next week actually looks nice and warm. So if we don't get our frost tonight, then it'll probably be at least a week before we get a frost. So I'm not going to pull these plants up. I'm not going to pull anything up at this point because I don't really know for sure what's going to happen. I'm going to prepare for a frost because it's very likely, but it's not a guarantee. The next thing I want to tackle is some of these pole bean trellises here. You can see these are definitely past the point of being edible, but we can open up the pod here, and you can see the seeds inside. These will be great for planting. So I can plant these next year, or we can just save these all and eat them. So I'm just gonna go ahead and harvest everything here that looks pretty ready to me. Now, ideally for seed saving, I would probably let these dry out a little bit more. This one here looks pretty good, but I think I'm just going to, I have a lot inside already, so I think I'm just gonna go ahead and harvest all of these that look mature. And then any that aren't really dry, we'll cook those up and use them for eating. The fully dried out ones I'll save for seeds. Over here in this main garden, we've got lots of beans of various kinds over here to harvest too, so we're going to add those to our little pile. So I decided what I'm going to do. Beans like this that are clearly not close to dry or ready, but obviously too far to eat, I'm going to leave because I would say there's a better than 50% chance we're going to get a frost tonight, which is why I'm preparing for it. But it's not a sure thing, and I definitely have enough beans already inside that we've been harvesting over the last few weeks to save for seeds next year, and plenty to try eating too. So if we end up losing a few, that's okay. I would rather take a little bit of a risk and let those mature a little more if they get the chance. So I do have one more job that I want to get done today, and this technically doesn't have to be done before the first frost, but I'm allowing the frost to motivate me to get this done. I am going to cover one of my raised beds. I'll show you what that looks like. So in this bed in the back of the garden here, I have some sprouting broccoli and various types of kale planted throughout this bed. These do not technically need to be covered for the first frost. These are winter hardy plants, and they'll survive a light frost. Even with a little bit of protection, they'll survive a pretty heavy frost, which is not any time soon in the forecast. But I'm sure that you can see these plants are tiny. We had a lot going on this summer, and I did not get to starting my fall seedlings early enough. And as you can see, I'm not planning on getting any kind of harvest from these this fall. What I am hoping to do is to overwinter them and get an extra early spring harvest. Now that's a little risky. They may not overwinter. The kale probably will, but the sprouting broccoli, I'm not sure. I know some places with warmer climates than mine overwinter that fairly regularly, and I think that's actually the preferred way to grow it. Here in Connecticut, it's kind of a toss-up. Some years we do get pretty severe winters. I'm not sure what this one will shape up to be, but I do want to cover them. It doesn't cost me anything to cover them, and that way I get the chance of possibly getting an early spring harvest. So basically, We are still going to have warm enough weather for these to grow. I think the main issue at this point in the season is that there won't be enough daylight hours for it to really grow. I think the guideline is once you get down below 10 hours of daylight in a day, plants will just kind of hold steady and not really grow. I'm sure there are exceptions to that rule, but I think that's the general guideline. And we are at that point now in my season. So I don't anticipate seeing any significant growth from these plants. But what I can do is cover them and hopefully keep them alive over the winter. You see all these fallen leaves that are here. I'm just going to leave those in there. That will be insulation. In fact, I may pile up some more as the season goes on. And then if they survive the winter, what I'll have in the spring is already established seedlings that will hopefully take off and give me a nice early harvest. So that's kind of, it's not a guarantee. It depends on how my winter goes. If I get a mild winter, I'll probably be successful. If we have a challenging winter, I probably won't be. So either way, we're going to see what happens, and I'll keep you updated in the spring. So I have this clear plastic here, which I am going to lay over the hoop supports of this bed and basically create my own makeshift mini greenhouse. I have done this in the past many times, and it does provide me with a little bit of season extension. It's not as much as you would get with a true greenhouse, but it does keep the wind off the plants, which is a pretty significant, the wind is a pretty significant detriment to plants over the winter. Now, this is not going to keep a plant that, it's still going to get it's going to get cold in there over the night. So it's not going to keep a plant that is frost tender alive during a freeze. But what it will do is protect plants that are frost tolerant. It'll hopefully, in some cases, give me a few more weeks of harvesting time. And in this case, what I'm hoping to do is, even if the plants go dormant, I'm hoping to keep the roots alive and be able to harvest them in the spring. So you can see that I opened up this end of the tunnel, and I am going to go in and open up the other side as well, because this time of year, while it is going to get really cold at night, during the day it is still going to, at least some days, today's a little cool, but some days it is going to get warm and sunny. And even today, even though it's cool, it is sunny out. And this is going to work like a mini greenhouse and basically capture that sunlight. And what's going to happen is it's really going to heat up in there. I do not want to basically fry these plants. I want them to be able to stay alive. So for now, I'm just going to put the cover over them, and I'm going to keep the ends open the whole time, even when we have frost, until it gets really cold. And then I'll bundle them up tight and leave them for the winter. Honestly, next week I may end up taking this off completely, or at least loosening it up a little bit, because we are supposed to get some days in the 70s. Now under here, that could turn into, 80s, 90s. So I'm going to keep an eye on it. I did want to get it set up today, partly because I just wanted to get it done. The first frost is a powerful motivator for a gardener, and I wanted to basically harness that motivation and let it kind of give me, I guess, we'll use the word motivation again. Just give me the motivation, the little kick in the pants that I needed to actually get this done. So I'm just going to go open up the other end, and then we're going to let these little seedlings sit in here until spring, when they'll hopefully give us a delicious harvest. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today on this potentially last day before our first frost. I'd love to hear from you guys. Where are you located in the country or in the world? And have you had your first frost yet? As I said, it's mid-October when I'm filming this. It's going to be early November when you guys actually see this. So by the time you see this, I probably will have had my first frost, even if it doesn't happen tonight. And I would also love to hear, what do you do to prepare your garden for your first frost? I hope you're having a great day, and I can't wait to see you soon. I'll see you next time.